for main course then, Brumbies and the Reds. Now, I think pretty safe to say that we're all going to back the Reds on this one. We'll get to how much kind of as we wrap up our preview. But yeah, I think, look, I'll start us off with, last week we spoke a little bit about the last time, or 2 weeks ago, the last time the first time the Brumbies and Reds played. And it was in round 5 when the Brumbies won 22-20. And they just kind of were that composed Brumbies team we're used to seeing. And the Reds were perhaps, I know it's a bit rich to say that in a season of 10 games, they've matured a lot, but certainly a different side. They were giving away a lot more penalties. They weren't able to just, keep in it for the whole game. So kind of faded off towards the end and weren't mature enough just to have that level of composure. Whereas the Brumbies, they were behind on all the attacking stats, but they scored a few driving over maul tries, just kicked some goals, kept themselves in it, and managed to snatch that one away from the Reds. So that was round 5. And then they played again in round 10. Harry, do you want to talk about that?
Round 10 was the real dominant one a couple of weeks ago, right? 26-7, and it was just all the Reds. The Brums really never got a look in. It was 3 tries to 1, even though the Reds had less ball as well, 47% possession, 44 territory. The Brumbies just didn't really look like they were up for the fight, whether they were just holding a whole lot back and just using this as an extended preparation for the final wouldn't surprise me. But they definitely looked off the pace, and the Reds' defence was kind of putting them on the back foot all day. The one thing I would say as well, you mentioned the change in the Reds' maturity through the season. Personally, it really surprised me to see that the Brumbies looked a bit off the pace coming back from COVID when they looked so good beforehand. And I don't think they've ever quite got back to the level they were before the break, whereas the Reds kind of built into the first iteration of Super Rugby this year and did the same in this competition. The Brumbies they just had something missing. I don't know what it is. They've still been obviously doing well enough to be the best performed team in Super Rugby AU so far, but they're far from their top performance.
I think that's a great point in terms of the Reds definitely came back the fittest from the COVID break, because can you imagine being a player and having to come back and face Brad Thorne? That's why they all came back in the best shape. That's for sure.
They were scared. They were scared for sure.
Absolutely.
No, yeah. I feel very similar about the Brumbies there. There's just been something, I don't know what it is either. They've been relatively composed. They've still been able to close out a lot of tight games, but just something's been missing from them in recent weeks or throughout a lot of this season. And to me, I think the Reds have been building week in, week out. So, this is exactly the 2 teams we thought would have been in the finals. And, my gut tells me it's going to be the Reds.
Yeah, we've got a couple of possible lineup changes in this one as well. So for the Brumbies, the big question is Noah Alessio. So I think that he was always meant to be in and around a return this week. I think it could have even been last week if they somehow ended up in a semi. So there hasn't been an update on him. But I don't know, what do you guys think? If he was fully fit and got to train through a good chunk of this 2-week break, would you start him or would you bring him in off the bench? Or do you think this is just the wrong time to make such a big change to a playmaking position?
I'd start him. He was fantastic.
Look, it's a pretty tough one. I think it's been, how many weeks since he's played? 4 or 5 weeks? More maybe?
Yeah, maybe 5 or 6.
It's an awfully long time to bring him straight back into the starting side of a finals, but for me, he was streaks above Kunzel, who I think is a good player. So I think for my team culture and knowing what this year is and that it is slightly different, I'd probably be starting Kunzel and trying to work off what we have, and depending how things are going, bring Alessio back into the game, depending on how things are happening. So it could be as early as the start of the second half, but I think it's tough to throw him straight back in front of Kunzel, but it doesn't mean it won't happen.
Yeah, I think
it's true as well, and I guess... Sorry, you go, Harry.
I think a lot of it will just depend on how much time he has to train with the starting squad in this 2-week lead up as well, right?
I was just going to say what Lalesio brings is he does bring injection off the bench. I hadn't really thought about it before, but bringing Kunzel back on is kind of like bringing Kunzel off the bench is kind of just like a, we'll finish this game out. But bringing Lalesio is like when you want to change something or lift the pace.
Yeah,
try and lift it in that last 20. So that could be certainly a tactic, I guess.
Who's the Brumbies young fullback that was getting a run in the first block of the season though? Mack Hansen.
Mack Hansen.
Because he's the other option, like if you don't play Kunzel, it gives you the opportunity of bringing Mack Hansen off the bench. And he was excellent.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I do agree. Look, it'll be interesting to see a test of the culture and character of the Brumbies here, Lesia's been out for a little while. Kunzel's been doing a job for them. You'd think that they're going to want to back one of their young developing 10s who's been there week in, week out throughout this period for them. So I think if you're talking about building your team culture, you've got to go with the guy that's been playing and back him. And as I said, depending on how he goes, depends when you bring on your bench.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, moving along. One point that Harry brings up every week, and I think we all agree certainly has an impact, is the travel. And it's only because of the nature of the travel, Flying from Queensland down is normally an hour and a half or something like that. But it's the fact that you've got to get a bus out to a different airport, get on a small charter plane, another long bus. I think Harry last week mentioned, some of them were turning into 8-hour trips that were traditionally, something like 3 end to end. We're talking almost. So that does just eat up the day and does take a little bit out of you. So yeah, with that in mind, the Reds away this year against away is a funny way of talking about it. They lost to the Rebels and the Force, both in the inner Western Sydney.
No, they didn't lose to the Force. Sorry, they lost. They beat the Force 5-57.
Oh, yeah, did I just say lost to the Force? God, what am I?
You did.
What did I say? Sorry. No. Well, they drew to the Rebels. They lost to the Brumbies and lost to the Tars. They did beat the Force, but yeah, let's just remove home ground advantage with the Force in this argument. So anyway, it hasn't proven great for them, and certainly the Brumbies definitely have a home ground advantage. Very difficult to beat the Brumbies in Canberra. The last loss the Brumbies have had at home was back in February against the Highlanders, and it was by a point.
And to extend back even further than that, it was another year back in Feb when they lost their last home game before that as well. So they're few and far between. And I think the fact that the Reds have been held up in Queensland for the best part of the last 6 weeks or something, with the exception, it was the only time they've left Queensland in the last chunk of time was to play in the Gold Coast against the Force. So they've had a really, really lucky time in that respect. And this has been a bit of a test for them, I think, or this will be a bit of a test for them to be so disrupted.
Yeah, and it's been since 2014 since they've actually beaten the Brumbies in Canberra. I think if we're honest, this year is very different to previous seasons. We're talking about away matches, but I mean, you're not flying over to South Africa. You're not flying over, to another country. Queensland to Canberra isn't too tricky in comparison to, what they could be facing. But I mean, if we go off this short sort of history of this season, it is still proving to be a sort of a tough ask to play away from home.
I don't know. I think it's very different, to be fair. Before we move on, like that's 2 flights. I don't think they go direct from Brisbane to Canberra either, do they? I'm pretty sure they have to fly into Sydney, and then there's only 2 flights a day for most of these regional flights. So they're probably hanging around the airport for a number of hours as well. It is a big trip, and it's the same day travel. When you're flying to South Africa or New Zealand in the previous forms of Super Rugby, it's so different because they get in there early and they are acclimatized, and they get time to spend their day setting themselves up properly. You can't. I don't think we can really appreciate just how disrupted their preparation must be.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree at all. I think it's still a tough ask. I do think same day travel, although it's disruptive, to Canberra is, even if with 2 flights, is still probably less than flying to Johannesburg, staying away from home, all these other sort of things, throwing out your preparations for 2-3 days rather than just that day leading into a match. They're completely different. I totally agree, but they went down to Canberra and were unlucky to lose by 2 previously. So,
I think
I
we've got
mean,
the half.
sorry?
I think we've got the glass is half full and the glass is half empty from the both of you. So that's good. But no, I think the one positive for them with looks like I mean it's early to call it now, but the weather looks like they're bringing down a bit of that Queensland weather with them. It's supposed to be sunny in 21, which is got to be like a record high for Canberra on the weekend. So
middle of summer.
yeah, that's it. So that's only got to favour the Reds, you'd have to think. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, we know the Brumbies can play some expansive rugby, but I mean that's really been the Reds' game, and that's where the Brumbies have been having real difficulties in containing those Reds outside backs. So the Brumbies would prefer it, be doing the rain dance, prefer it to be pouring, and just make it an absolute slugfest. So yes. The set piece. We've talked about this a little bit before. The Brumbies have been laid the seed about the Reds not scrumming straight after their round 10 loss. Will the referee pick up where they left off, kind of with that, or will the Reds just dominate? Tupou has been unbelievable. The Red scrum has just been unstoppable, more or less. So.
They did get a few calls go against them against the Rebels, right? Like I didn't think that was one-way traffic. So maybe it has just planted that seeded out.
We'll have to see. Nels.
Yeah, I think one thing that we alluded to a little bit earlier is the outside backs for the Reds. In these 2 previous matchups through Super Rugby AU, the Brumbies just haven't been able to contain those Reds outside backs. Dungunu and Campbell have just absolutely run amok. Combined stats from both those 2 matchups, Dungunu's run 205 metres, broken 9 tackles, thrown 5 offloads, and made 3 line breaks, where Jock Campbell has beaten 10 defenders, made 6 line breaks, and set up 3 tries. That is just absolutely massive from two players on the field. So I don't know what the Brumbies are going to have to do to shut those guys down. Andy Muirhead has probably been better than he had in previous years in terms of his defence. Last time these guys came up against each other, it was a few certain people that really just did not step up in terms of defence. Cargie, do you know who those 2 blokes were?
Yes, mate. You're tugging at my heartstrings. Tavita Kurandrani, the choo-choo. I guess we'll discuss it. We can discuss it now before the dessert. But is it over? Is he done? Apart from losing me the fantasy final by forgetting how to place the ball on the ground once over the try line, the choo-choo's just been. He's been off. He hasn't been. He's snuck off on us. He has not been on. And
he's just been 1-2, mate. That's all he's been. 1-2. It's not been 2-2.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it hasn't even been 1-2. I won't even give him that. You know what I mean? There's been the steam train has been logless. There's been no fire, no logs in the oven. Enough analogy. Sorry. Anyway, he's missed 5 of 13 tackles in their last matchup, and that's no bueno. He's been in years gone past the Wallabies' defensive bedrock there at 13. That's been kind of the one thing you could always count on him for. And certainly, look, whilst they've had some more options in terms of, ball runners, running some great lines in Simone and Qatar and whatnot, who've been taking away some of the signature choo-choo unders lines. His defence has always been that bedrock of his game, and he just hasn't been able to keep it up. So when coming up against, look, we don't know if we'll be coming up against Bataya I don't think it matters if he's coming up against Bataya or Paisami. They have both been absolutely electric. So, defensive liabilities. So, yeah, I mean, apart from him, then look, we've got, Dungunu, who can contain him. It's probably going to be him up against bloody Muirhead, if it's not Cutter. And you all know what I think of Muirhead.
You love him.
Legend.
I hope it's Cutter for the Brumbies' sake. But, so anyway, good luck stopping Dungunu. And if Pataya's on the other wing, good luck stopping him. Although that'll be a great battle, Tom Wright and Pataya. But I've got my money on Pataya there. So.
Last time these guys came up against each other, I think Tom Wright, he also missed 3 of 8 tackles. So again, it's tough. Like, he's someone who I think's been a relatively solid defender. Harry doesn't like him as much as I think we do, but he got really outclassed against Reds last time as well.
I think I've just got flashbacks from the podcasts of Harry saying in the last matchup in round 10, Tom Wright solely let in 2 tries from the Reds. He just ran up quickly, left the defence out.
Shot in.
And so, yes, he won't want to be doing that again.
Did we mention the how the back line we expect to change if CFS was out?
I'm not sure we did. It's rare we don't repeat ourselves, but why don't you take us through?
Yeah, I mean, we skipped over it, but obviously the expectation, as we said in the last game, was that Pataya would be back from his concussion and that pace, and CFS, Chris Fawal-Sotia, was in real doubt. If that's the case, I feel like the obvious option here is that Paisami plays outside centre, and then that way Pataya can slot in on the wing, and it won't really disrupt their training at all. The fact that he has to go through these concussion protocols, maybe in, maybe out, I feel like it's a lot easier for the back line to be settled if you're just dropping a winger in or out. So
I think that's the...
It's pretty scary. Scary to have the prospect of having both Paisami and Pataya on the field.
Yeah, I think Chris Fawal-Sotia adds a whole lot of punch as well, and he's probably a more rounded player than Paisami. But Paisami is just a very aggressive runner. So it would be quite scary, I'm sure, against him and Pataya linking up together. The other less likely option is that we see Jock Campbell shift to the wing, which we have seen a lot of this season as well, with Bryce Hegarty shifting to fullback, giving them another kicking option, trying to play a little bit of a smarter game plan, against these Brumbies.
And a cool option in Bryce Hegarty as well.
Yeah, surely though the Brumbies are not the team that you play the kicking option against. Like, the Reds are going to want to have a dig and throw the ball around at them, stress their defensive line a little bit and try and make them uncomfortable. But my question was, how do the Brumbies win? And I feel like I say it every single week, but the only way I can see it happening is the same way they beat them down in Canberra earlier this year, and that is where the Reds were easily the better team, but the Brumbies just stayed in it, kicking their points, and then they scored 2 rolling maul tries to really cut the gap in half and eventually squeeze ahead. And I think it's the same this time round, right? Like, if the Reds can't stop the rolling maul, then this game could go either way. If they can, I just think the Reds have way too much firepower.
Agreed.
Harry, we were saying just before the pod that Folau-Fainga is definitely due. He's due a try. It's been...
if I get Lachlan over again to watch this game, I'm telling you, Folau-Fainga always scores rolling more tries.
That'll be the hot tip for this one,
Yeah.
No, very good. All right, well, I think, we've touched on it a lot. I think the Reds have all the belief in the world right now, and kind of just look unstoppable. So I think we're all tipping the Reds, but by how much? I won't be as optimistic as I usually am. I'll say the Reds will by, I'm going to go with 9 points.
Wow. Harry?
I've realised that there's no accountability on this vlog podcast. So I'm going to go Brumbies because they are the clear, mature champion side to win by 4 points.
All right, I'm just going to take some notes now for next week's pod.
Look, I'm going to go with the emotion in this one, and I think the Reds have been building, and they're, there's so much excitement coming out of these guys. I think the Reds will get it done, but I don't think it'll be a big win. I'm going to say Reds by 3.
Go the Reds.
Harry's 100% putting money on the Reds. He's just done that so that he can chuck a big "I told you so" next week if it pays off.
Yep.
And chances are
Instead, we get to both say, "I told you so" to him.
Yeah, we'll forget to call him up on it probably, but no, very good.